Welcome to the Reality Taboo, where no topic is off limits. It's December 26th, 2025. I'm Jeff. Joining me is my co-host, Ness. We're going to cover more on Candace Owens and Turning Point. I'm feeling like Michael Corleone from The Godfather Part 3.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
I'll speak for myself, but I didn't plan on covering either of these topics anymore in the near future, but developments keep occurring and more things come up that are worth discussing. So I want to start with Candace Owens's latest theory or segment on the Charlie Kirk killing that occurred on September 10th. So I'm calling the Fort Huachuca story Candace Owens's jump the shark moment. So on December 19th, Candace Owens featured a guest on her podcast who claimed to have witnessed Charlie Kirk's widow, his head of security, and a U.S. congressman at a secret military meeting the day before Kirk's assassination, so that would be September 9th. The guest was identified as Mitchell Harrison Snow. He goes by Mitch, and he described stumbling upon a high-level gathering at Fort Huachuca while attempting to retrieve decades-old military records. Fort Huachuca is a U.S. Army installation in Cochise County, Arizona. It's about 15 miles north of the Mexican border. The base is home to the Army Intelligence Center of Excellence and is primarily a training facility for military intelligence personnel. And Snow, he's 56 years old. He claims to be a former Special Forces operative, and it appears that he served as a U.S. Army Special Forces medic and was medically discharged in 1996 following an 80-foot fall that caused severe injuries. And then he claims to have been put under a non-disclosure agreement from May 1990 to May 2025 related to discovering government involvement with drug cartels 35 years ago. And so on September 9th, Snow says that he traveled to Fort Huachuca to retrieve, quote, old records, end quote, related to his decades-old case. And so he says he checked into the Candlewood Suites on the evening of September 8th. This is a hotel at on the base. And he said in the hotel lobby that evening, he noticed a man, quote, with a professional military sheen to him sitting on a couch. And this man was supposedly later joined by a woman with, quote, striking blue eyes who appeared well off but was dressed down. And Snow claims he later identified these individuals as Brian Harpole, who is Charlie Kirk's head of security, and Erika Kirk. And by the time Snow returned to the lobby, the couple had departed in a, quote, big green truck. And so, according to Snow, then the next day, he walked into a high-security meeting the next morning that featured more than 12 lieutenant colonels, and this would be highly unusual for a gathering of that type to occur outside the Pentagon. And 3 people supposedly left the meeting, and Snow claims that he identified them as Erika Kirk, Brian Harpole, and Congressman Mark Amodei of Nevada. And Snow claims he is 95 to 99% certain of Erika Kirk's identity based on her, quote, rare blue eyes and ponytail. And I guess he matched that against an old photograph. And then the military police, I guess, detained Snow for 7 hours, suspected of being a spy. And then when he flew back to Washington State, Snow says his wife called him and said Charlie Kirk had been assassinated. So when I learned about this, I was very skeptical. I think there's, as I've looked into this issue, I think there's a lot of issues with the credibility of this case. First, the stated mission of Mitch to this going to Fort Huachuca was to get personnel records. The Fort Huachuca is an intelligence training facility. It's not a personnel records depository. The personnel records are stored in St. Louis, Missouri, and you would probably apply for these records online. There's no sort of walk-in service at Fort Huachuca or any other training installation.
If we take this Mitch character at face value, which is a dicey proposition, but if we do, this was something that was addressed, that he had tried to obtain these records through the proper channels for years and it had gone nowhere, and he had been stonewalled. So he decided in his telling to go back to the base where the unit that he was a part of decades ago is currently based out of. And that is why he, again, by his own accounting, that's why he went there to try to drop in and get some information in person that he was unable to get through the proper channels.
People are digging into Mitch's background as we speak, but already some questionable things have come out about his past. He's had multiple restraining orders and protection orders entered against him in Benton County, Washington. There's a domestic violence case. There's an ongoing divorce case. He's had multiple domestic violence charges. He hasn't paid child support. And this is not just to attack him because we want to kick somebody when he's down, but if you're assessing, if all you have is somebody's say-so, it's perfectly relevant to look at their background and assess whether what they're saying is credible. So next, there are fundamental issues with eyewitness testimony. Eyewitness testimony is famously unreliable. There have been many cases documented where people are absolutely certain about what they saw, and it's proven that they're 100% wrong. And in this case, there is no sort of rigorous evaluation of how Mitch or how he is so certain about these people. I couldn't tell for sure, but it sounds like he didn't even know who Erika Kirk was before he supposedly saw her. And then subsequent, after it blew up as a big media event, he saw pictures of Erika Kirk and then retroactively asserted that he had seen Erika Kirk. And so it's generally eyewitness testimony is very dicey. And I think the specific circumstances of this cast even more doubt on any sort of reliability of these of Mitch. And then in subsequent days, there have been multiple alibis that have been presented. And this is where Alex Jones enters the picture. He claims, and other people back this up, or I should say documents have been released that back this up, showing flight receipts, showing that Brian Harpool was in Dallas, Texas on September 9th. And I guess you could argue that those documents were fabricated. I suppose it's possible. I saw the documents. I think they were Southwest Airlines. They looked very legitimate to me. I've flown Southwest. They looked, at least on the surface, credible. And I think Brian Harpool he lives in Dallas, or maybe his company's based out of Dallas. So the idea that he would be there would be expected.
This does feel tabloidy to try to track these details virtually. And matching up the logistics with the itinerary that's been provided for Harpool does seem like it is quite a stretch for him to have conceivably been in Arizona on the morning of the 9th. It is not impossible based on the itinerary that was provided by Alex Jones, who showed that Harpool went from LAX to Dallas on the 7th, and then went from Dallas to Salt Lake City at 1:42 in the afternoon, from Dallas to Salt Lake City the afternoon of the 9th. And this alleged meeting that Mitch allegedly stumbled into took place at 7:30 a.m. and the report that was filed about Mitch's presence at the meeting was filed at 11:30 a.m., so hours after all of the events had gone down. So it is at least theoretically conceivable that Harpool could have went from Arizona to Dallas in that 4 or 5 hour window before flying from Dallas to Salt Lake City. And to put it from the conspiratorial narrative, to put all those pieces in place, it would be the intention would be to create the perception of an alibi that wasn't actually a legitimate alibi.
The other person, Erika Kirk, who was alleged to be there, I don't believe she has addressed the issue at all. There is, my understanding, the only evidence that any of this occurred, or I should say that Snow saw any of these people or saw any sort of meeting going on is his say-so. There hasn't been security footage or any sort of corroborating evidence. And I think what's also interesting about this case is the appearance, like as I mentioned earlier, Alex Jones. And he first felt compelled to weigh in on the Candace Owens' Kirk investigation when she began promoting the theory that Egyptian military aircraft were tracking Erika Kirk, and she had stated that between 68 and 73 flights coincided with the Kirk's travel schedule, and there was one jet parked at Provo Municipal Airport days before the assassination. And on December 17th, Jones's outlet InfoWars published an analysis showing that Owens's flight data was fundamentally flawed and that at least 66% of her location claims were wrong. The Fort Huachuca case is the escalation, and the fact that Alex Jones, who's predisposed by friendship with Owens and professional identity, he would have every incentive to bend over backwards to accommodate conspiracy theories.
I think I would disagree with that strongly. I think that conspiratorial thinking is Alex Jones' bivouac, and so to have someone else elbowing in and being more successful in peddling conspiracies than Alex Jones is definitely a threat to his business model, and he is in a position where he cannot brook any threats to his business model because, as I'm sure we'll get to, he's been bankrupted, and what if all of the judgments against his assets are ever realized, he will be nuked from outer space in terms of his assets. And so he has a very real vested interest in taking out of the knee someone else who is peddling conspiracies. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that it's not a conspiracy, or we should probably just dispense with the term conspiracy. It's more of a term that is useful in the vernacular, but just because something is a conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean that it is incorrect, but it also doesn't mean that just because he is undercutting its veracity that it's not totally false.
Yes, and I would think Ness probably has a higher opinion of Alex Jones even than I do. I think we both agree. He can tell me if he disagrees. That he got totally railroaded during the defamation cases, the one in Connecticut and the one in Texas. However, I think his behavior was reprehensible. There was clear evidence presented to Alex Jones and multiple people at InfoWars over the years showing that this was not a hoax and that these parents really did lose their children. And some of these parents faced genuine harassment, and some of them had to move because people were just constantly harassing them, and directly inspired by Alex Jones and InfoWars. And they were shown to have been making tons. I think I saw up to $900,000 per day on their show during the time when they were running all sorts of, frankly, wild conspiracy theories about the school shooting in Sandy Hook.
I think my assessment of these personalities, I just take a much different perspective than Jeff does when I try to evaluate them. In the case of Alex Jones and Sandy Hook, presuming that it was something that he should have perceived to be false and that he was able to monetize it. Okay, so he was wrong about Sandy Hook where 20 people died, but he was right about Iraq where 2 million plus people died. And the amount of money that was made in Iraq by all of the institutional power structures, the alphabet soup agencies, the defense contractors, the bankers, the International Monetary Fund, on and on and on, just utterly dwarfs to an exponential degree any benefit that Alex Jones accreted with Sandy Hook. And so when I assess, I don't expect my pundits who are out on a limb with almost everything that they do to get most of the things right. But if they get a couple of the big things right, then that more than makes up for the things that they've gotten wrong. And so I don't feel any sort of personal connection. I think of them as conduits to potential truth in a sea of lies, and I expect that they are going to, by the very nature of what they're doing, they're going to bite often on bait that isn't real food. And this Harple story with this Mitch character seems like the perfect setup, and we'll get to it. Alex Jones is contesting that Mitch is a reliable witness who saw who he said he saw, but importantly, he doesn't, so far as I've been able to tell, it isn't contesting at all that all of these things happened. And so if we want to be if we want to be magnanimous in our assessment of Candace Owens, it's that she was very naive in putting someone forward who had a compelling story that logistically matched up. And it seems like he was there and there was a real report filed about the incident that he was involved in. But of course, he could have just easily been, he could be some opportunistic grifting loser, or he could be someone who is decades connected to the military and is being used here as effectively as a Fed. That term gets tossed around all the time, but this would be a real Fed operation where he is being deployed to take down the credibility of what Candace Owens is pushing on.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying about Alex Jones. However, I think the whole premise of what you were saying, that he got a lot of important things wrong, and those outweigh the mistakes he's made along the way, such as Sandy Hook. I think that would be true if in all those cases he was acting out of good faith and that he was following his pursuit of truth. I don't think that's what he was doing at Sandy Hook. At some point, when you get overwhelming evidence that this was not these were not crisis actors, and you still continue to do that at the same time, continue to push those theories, knowing it's causing real harm to real people and parents who had their children murdered, and you're making tons and tons of money off of it, I think you lose any sort of charity or charitable interpretation.
So by that line of reasoning, and this is not going to be the own that it might sound like it's going to be based on how I think you'll respond, but by that assessment, then you believe that there should be absolutely no charitable feelings given at all whatsoever to the State Department or the U.S. federal government or any of the big defense contractors or any of the of NATO or the bipartisan foreign policy consensus, because all of the agents of all of these institutions regularly get things obviously wrong and profit enormously from doing so, and have done so for decades and decades.
Well, those are institutions composed of many, many people. But yes, I guess if you were to pinpoint individuals within those organizations that were doing those things, yes, I would have the same standard for them as I do for Alex Jones. I try to have the same standard for everyone. And we'll get into this later, but this topic is interesting to me too, because of it seems to me these differing standards we have for different people in different positions, and there's sort of a David versus Goliath dynamic where if you're David, you seem to get a lot more slack cut to you. So I try to apply the same rigorous standard as to everyone.
Well, what I think we're stumbling into is the feature that is the managerial state. And this is the reason that the managerial state exists in the way that it does. And all these institutional layers that I'm always talking about, that is for a reason, because the very nature of what we're trying to do here, the Iraq War, I think you would say that the Iraq War and the fallout from that was almost immeasurably worse than what Alex Jones said about Sandy Hook and the harassment that the parents of the slain children had to suffer through.
Yes.
And yet it's virtually impossible. Nobody is being held accountable for Iraq. No one. There are counties, all of the counties around Washington, D.C. are the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth richest counties in the United States. And they don't produce anything. It is all from things like the Iraq War and that a military industrial complex and other industrial complexes that the government is hand in hand with, like the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the like. And yet even the figurehead for the person who, if there's one person you can really pinpoint the blame for Iraq on, or maybe two, George Bush and Dick Cheney, they not only did they not suffer, they're immeasurably wealthier and more highly regarded in terms of the social status that they enjoy in all of the elite institutions now than they were at the eve of the Iraq War and its immediate aftermath. And so the managerial state, the way that the system is set up, is such that the people who have relatively little power, like Alex Jones or Candace Owens, are the ones who really pay for the mistakes that they make, even though the mistakes that they make are far less consequential than the mistakes that I put mistakes in air quotes because I think they are mistakes if the intention is supposed to be what the stated reason for the various campaigns that the United States and NATO get involved in, but I don't think that is really the stated reason. I think the reasons are the system is what it does, and it enriches these people and keeps them in power, and always maintains their inability to be held accountable for any of the mistakes that they make. Since we'll continue to do a fair share of conjecture about corrupt and compromised motivations, now is as good a time as any to mention Laura Loomer, who is a berserk representative of the MAGA side of things for sure, who seems to have Trump's ear for whatever reason, is a very close ally of the Trump administration and Donald Trump in particular. And she, in the wake of Alex Jones going after Candace Owens, said that she was, in fact, responsible for pushing Alex Jones into understanding how, quote, malicious and insane, unquote, Owens is. And so there is a plausible set of events in which Alex Jones is in that precarious financial position that we alluded to earlier, that he is effectively being protected by the Trump administration but that if he doesn't do what he is effectively told to do vis-a-vis this burgeoning problem for the MAGA movement and go after Candace Owens to take her out, well, then that protection that the Trump administration offers via the Department of Justice, going after the state of Connecticut or the state of Texas and trying to bring on behalf of Alex Jones lawsuit that his constitutional rights were violated and therefore the bankruptcy judgments are invalid. Maybe that is there in the back pocket as a sort of implicit guarantee of protection from ruination for Alex Jones, at least as long as the MAGA Trump administration is in power. But if Alex Jones doesn't do what he needs to do here and take out Candace Owens, who, as aforementioned, is creating a lot of problems for the messaging and the cohesiveness of that floundering MAGA movement, populist movement in America. If Alex Jones doesn't do what he is commanded to do, then that tacit protection will be rescinded. At the very least, it's an interesting optics observation for Alex Jones to go after the number one anti-Semite in America, or maybe in the world. Or that title, I suppose, could be disputed. Maybe Nick Fuentes deserves that more than Candace Owens, but certainly Candace Owens is in contention for being the most notorious and influential anti-Semite, as that term is used more to be a descriptor than to be pejorative than Candace Owens. And so for Alex Jones to go after her and then it be revealed that Laura Loomer was the one guiding him to see the light on Candace Owens is, again, an interesting optics observation at the least.
So getting back to Candace Owens and the Fort Huachuca story, I compared it to a jump the shark moment, and I think that fits. And that phrase comes from Happy Days, the 1970s television show. Was one of the main characters, Fonzie's clad in his leather jacket and water skis, and he literally jumps over a shark. And so that moment was so absurd, and it's seen as marking the show's irreversible decline in quality. And so the term has now become shorthand for the point at which something once credible descends into self-parody. And well, the question might be, does jumping the shark intrinsically mean a loss in audience and viewership? It's not necessarily that simple. So Happy Days, for instance, continued for 6 more seasons after the jump the shark moment, even though critics agree the show's quality had peaked long before that. And then The Simpsons would be another interesting case study. There's not a consensus one single jump the shark moment, but fans usually put the decline around season 9 or 10. So in my view, Candace Owens' quote investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination is increasingly resembling a reality TV true crime kind of serial show. And it has cliffhangers, there's dramatic reveals, there's escalating twists. It's not primarily a rigorous truth-finding mission. So Owens will tease bombshell revelation. She'll have a dramatic 4.5-hour private meeting with Erika Kirk. She'll bring on a mysterious whistleblower with a dramatic backstory that goes back 35 years. She's promising documents and evidence that in many cases never materialize. And each episode builds on the last. The stakes get risen. There's new characters introduced all the time. There's Egyptian aircraft, secret military meetings. It just keeps escalating. And I would argue, looking at in isolation, maybe her show since September 10th when Charlie was killed up to now, there was some interesting stuff at the beginning, which we covered. I think she raised some really legitimate questions and really brought important questions to light. And that'd be like early Simpsons, season 3, 4, and it continues on and it's decent. And then it starts declining. And then the Fort Huachuca Mitch interview was the moment where it just completely jumped the shark, and we'll see where it goes from here.
So does that mean you're giving a stamp of approval to her Brigitte Macron investigation? Because that all came prior to this jump the shark moment. So this would be to keep the analogy going, it wasn't the start, but that Brigitte Macron saga would be like seasons 3 through 6, 3 through 7.
Oh, when you start going beyond the September 10th timeframe, my analogy kind of falls apart. So I haven't really followed the Brigitte Macron thing, although I have looked into that, and they have apparently offered her, Candace Owens, they've offered her like birth certificates that Brigitte Macron of her children, the birth certificates of her children. They've given her multiple, assuming the documents are authentic, pretty clear-cut case that she is actually a woman.
I can't speak at all to that, but I'll return to the differences in the way Jeff and I assessed these sorts of things. And Candace Owens in particular, the questions that she raised, the reason that anybody knows about them is because of her. There is no other major figure in independent media or any other media, corporate media for that matter, who has anything like the reach and influence that she does. And so going all the way from the question about the projectile that putatively took out Charlie Kirk to the fabrications or lies or misstatements, however you'd like to characterize them, of the various members of Turning Point USA that we covered previously, to the now burgeoning skepticism of Erika Kirk as a competent CEO for Turning Point USA. None of this would have occurred if not for Candace Owens, because the clear message from all of the opinion makers on the independent media right, in addition to the official agents of power that were present at the memorial for Charlie Kirk, all of them unanimously were in agreement that the official story was a single shooter, case closed. FBI has clear incriminating evidence and a confession, and there's nothing else to see here. If you are incredulous about that, as I am, then the lack of incredulity on the part of Candace Owens in giving the floor to someone with an extraordinary, almost literally incredible tale, that is something that is forgivable from my perspective. And I'm less interested in assessing the net good or bad with individuals and more interested in the fact that the official story, to put it in Vox Day terms, is, as is always the case, or at least seems to be as always the case, not as it is being presented as.
Or as Candace Owens would say, fake and gay. I would push back a little bit on the notion that Candace Owens is the only or the primary reason why anybody is talking about inconsistencies in the Charlie Kirk story. In fact, Alex Jones has covered the story, and I don't follow Alex Jones or Candace Owens super closely, but so I don't know how much he's covered it, but he certainly devoted multiple segments, and he claims credit at least for bringing to light the seemingly bizarre behavior of Kash Patel regarding the investigation, and him shutting down Tulsi Gabbard looking into the case. So Alex Jones has been covering it, and there's another investigative journalist named Stephen Gardner, who Alex Jones has had on the case, and he has He's not certainly not as big a following as Candace Owens, but he does have 1 million plus followers, and he's been covering the story pretty extensively as well. And he's actually gone, what in my view, what a good investigative journalist would do. He's gone to Utah Valley University in person. He's tried to get access to interviews with people, investigate where the shooting actually occurred. But certainly Candace Owens is the most high profile person in the media who has been consistently covering the Charlie Kirk killing.
Yes, of course, there are accounts and individuals who are doing their own attempts at shoe leather journalism, but in terms of it being a force that all the way up to Turning Point USA itself feels like it has to reckon with, I don't know how you can, if Candace Owens doesn't get on board, I think that this is only relevant to less than 1% of the population who follows people like the guy that you were talking about, but it never has the ability to impact anything in a meaningful way.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're seeming to you're not applying the same standard to Candace Owens as you would to a corporate media institution like CBS or CNN or MSNBC. And I certainly share disgust with those organizations for many of their biases and promoting fake stories like WMDs during the Iraq War and Russiagate. But I think where we maybe disagree is I don't think that in any way gives Candace Owens a pass, or I think we should apply the same standard we would apply to the corporate media. I think we should apply that same standard and have the same expectations towards Candace Owens. And so I'm thinking of trying to imagine if some sort of analogous scenario occurred on the corporate media. So let's say in the 2016, 17, 18 era, during the height of Russiagate, let's say CBS ran an interview about Donald Trump and Russiagate, and there was a witness with as many credibility problems as Mitchell Snow. He had domestic violence cases, disputed child support obligations, lots of holes in his story, and the entire basis being his supposedly eyewitness identification. Would we accept this as acceptable? Would this be acceptable? Would this be in any way responsible journalism? I would argue, of course not. And we would savage CBS in this scenario for running a story like that. And I guess all I'm saying is we should do the same to Candace Owens.
Yeah, I think the question there for that hypothetical would be the truth value. Is there any truth value in the assertions that this person they brought on who has credibility issues is making? And I think that gets to the heart of, again, the official story not being what it seems. So far as I'm able to tell, there isn't any dispute about these meetings actually happening and this guy being present at the time. And
I think there's dispute over the meetings occurring. I don't think there's dispute over whether Mitchell Snow physically went to that location at the time. And again, I think Candace Owens is being disingenuous because she's indicating that smoking gun or I guess definitive proof that she's correct. She applies this, or she refers to this incident report showing that Mitchell Snow. It's like that's not what the people like Alex Jones were criticizing. They weren't saying one way or the other whether Mitchell Snow was there. They were arguing whether this meeting occurred and whether Erika Kirk and Brian Harpool. And I guess this is part of what's frustrating to me about Candace. She gaslights, where she makes a claim and then the claim is disputed and she finds some other way to say, no, you actually didn't disprove it. And it's just kind of maddening to try to engage with her.
Well, what claim did she make as far as this? What claim did she make? The only claim that I've heard her make is that she says that she can verify the logistics of him being present where he said he was at the time. And she said explicitly multiple times in their interview that she cannot verify that he said that he saw who he said he saw. but only that he was legitimately there at the time. And so you can say that, yeah, she was being irresponsible by giving him to use the 2025 terminology, giving him a platform to say what he wanted to say. But she did not endorse his assessment of who he saw, only that, again, that she could verify that he was where he said he was at the time.
I guess I see that as an implicit on her part, implicitly saying that this story at first glance seems like it's true, seems like it's plausible. But yeah, you're right. I guess she could lawyerly get her way out of it by saying, do the whole "I'm just asking questions" routine and deflect any sort of responsibility for putting someone on there. But I would argue that she has more responsibility in vetting somebody like this before platforming him.
That's a certainly reasonable assessment, not one that I take particular issue with, but I'm not especially interested in patrolling the ability of people to say things. There's all kinds of dumb or silly things that are said on independent media platforms all the time, on corporate media as well. And so I'm more interested in where can some nuggets of real information be gleaned from, and without going back to what we've already discussed previously, I think that there has been some good fruit that's been born from the almost monomaniacal focus that Candace Owens has had on the Charlie Kirk killing over the last 3 months, has produced some light, even if it has shed a lot of heat.
Speaking of light and heat, they are both present in a related topic. I want to talk about 2 alleged communications from Charlie Kirk in his final 72 hours. So before 72 hours before his death on September 10th, there's 2 electronic communications that were allegedly sent, and they have become central to public discussions of circumstances surrounding his killing. And these communications, I think there's a lot of misinformation or confusion and conflation of these 2 separate messages. One of them definitely exists, the other does not, and they're sort of, one is used to support the existence of the other. So I just want to clear this up from what research I've been able to do. So the first communication is legitimate. It is a group chat message that was sent on September 8th, 2025 that Charlie Kirk sent. And the message is read in part. This is quoting from Charlie Kirk. Quote, "Just lost another huge Jewish donor, $2 million a year because we won't cancel Tucker. I'm thinking of inviting Candace." And then another quote from Charlie in that text message. "Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause." So that has rightfully gotten a lot of attention. And
and before we go into that, so that would you concede then that attention only exists because of Candace Owens?
I wouldn't go so far as to say only exists, but certainly she is the preponderant reason, the main reason why it's getting the attention it's giving. Yes, certainly. But getting back to these text messages, Andrew Colvett created, so from what I can gather, a day or 2 after Charlie Kirk was killed, Andrew Colvett took a screenshot of the group text messages and shared it with the government. So that was done within 33 hours. And then this is where I'm not sure. Somehow Candace Owens got a hold of those text messages and then published them on her YouTube show on October 6th. And then the next day, Colvett came out and said, quote, "That was a text grab, a screen grab that I had shared with people, so it is authentic. I actually am really excited that the truth is out there now. If you were so excited, why didn't you share it yourself?" But I don't see anything really wrong about this text message and how it was handled. I think Candace Owens has portrayed this event to indicate that Turning Point as being disingenuous or as not being forthcoming. And they certainly have not been forthcoming about other things. But again, there's so much information flying around. I thought that was worth clarifying. Now, the second alleged communication is not at all verified. And this one is regarding supposed death warning messages that Charlie Kirk sent within 24 hours before his death. And so the allegation, this is the only person making this allegation as far as I know, is Candace Owens. The allegation is that Charlie sent text messages via Signal or Telegram to Andrew Colvett and Dan Flood, who was security personnel, and these messages supposedly read, quote, "They're going to kill me." This is the one sent to Colvett. And then the, quote, "The left is going to kill me." This one was sent to Flood. And again, the sole source for these messages, Candace Owens, and she says that Andrew Colvett told her about them during a phone call within 72 hours of Kirk's death. And Owens has described this conversation as, quote, "off the record." And she explicitly states she never saw the messages. So in my view, Candace Owens, if she really did get a call from Andrew Colvett, why would she not just share some sort of phone records, as simple as just a screenshot of the call log when she supposedly received this phone call? And then the second question is, why would Colvett proactively shared these group text messages about Charlie complaining about the Jewish donors? It appears that Colvett voluntarily shared those with the FBI or with the government. So if he were also aware of Charlie Kirk saying that he was going to be killed, why would he not also share those messages? It doesn't. I can't think of a scenario where let's say both those messages exist, and Colvett would only choose to share the one about him being not liking Jewish donors and Charlie being fed up with them.
I don't think that he has denied that he shared that information, according to, again, what Candace Owens said that she talked about with Erika Kirk, that information had been turned over to the authorities, and Andrew Colvett hasn't denied that he had that conversation with Candace Owens, nor has he denied that Charlie Kirk feared that he was going to be killed. And Candace Owens' recounting of her meeting with Erika Kirk also confirmed that, according to what Candace Owens said. Now, as Jeff mentioned, Erika Kirk hasn't said anything about what transpired at the meeting, and so we could be back into they're leading her into a trap here, leading Candace Owens into a trap. But Turning Point USA, via Blake Neff and Andrew Colvett the week prior, had talked about how they were setting up for this big debunking of all of the outrageous claims that Candace Owens had made, and so that got audibled out at the last minute, apparently. But then this meeting between Candace Owens and Erika Kirk took place, and Candace Owens says that the assertions that she made were confirmed by Erika Kirk, and so if that wasn't true, it's very odd that Erika Kirk hasn't simply said that wasn't the case.
Speaking of Erika Kirk, next topic is the CBS Town Hall appearance that she made on December 13th. So at the CBS News Town Hall, Erika Kirk made several specific claims about her life before meeting Charlie Kirk. And the town hall was recorded in New York City. It was moderated by CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss. And side note before continuing, the whole reason, the whole event surrounding why Barry Weiss is the editor-in-chief at CBS News is worthy of an episode in and of itself. But the short version is that Larry Ellison of Oracle bought CBS, and he was concerned about the supposed anti-Semitic viewpoint of CBS and other corporate media. And so he put in a Jewish Zionist, Barry Weiss, and also Larry Ellison purchased via Paramount, which Larry Ellison bought. So Paramount bought Barry Weiss's news and opinion site, The Free Press, for $150 million. Back to the town hall. It was certainly largely framed to portray Erika Kirk in a very sympathetic light. And there was some conversation between Barry Weiss and Erika Kirk, and then they did a town hall format where people from the crowd came up and asked questions to Erika Kirk. And so I'm going to play one of those questioners coming up. I'll play the question and then Erika's answer.
We have a woman here that has a question perfectly calibrated to this part of our conversation. Yeah. I want to hand it over to Isabella Reggi.
Thank you. And Erika, you and your family are in my prayers.
Thank you.
I'm a 26-year-old Christian woman living in New York City. I would like to stay here long term, but I wonder whether it's sustainable. Do you believe there's a place for women like myself in modern cities who care about having a career, but also marrying a like-minded Christian conservative man?
Well, yeah. So it just depends on where you're looking. you know, or if you're on the apps. I don't know if you're on the apps. I don't know if, I'm not going to ask you your personal journey. But what I will say is when I lived out here, I was here for 5 years. I never dated here because I saw vicariously through my roommate how terrible it was. Somehow getting drinks was the replacement of having coffee and breakfast. I personally would rather have coffee or brunch with someone than go. I don't drink. I find it unproductive, not because I'm holier than whatever. I just don't operate that way.
Charlie Kirk and Erika met in September 2018. And so knowing that, combining with the clip we just played of Erika, that she's claiming that she lived in New York City for 5 years before meeting Charlie, and during that 5-year period she didn't drink and she didn't date. So that she is saying between 2013 to September 2018 she did not drink or date. Several clearly verified information contradicts that claim. First of all, in summer 2018, Erika Kirk appeared on Bravo's reality television series Summer House, which is literally a dating show. And this falls squarely in that 5-year period where Erika Kirk claims she didn't drink or date. And you can go on YouTube right now and search for this show. I can give you the episode. It's season 3, episode 11. It was filmed in summer 2018. It aired on May 12th, 2019. And in that episode, there features clips of Erika Kirk at a rooftop bar engaging in dating with a man and drinking. Next, in 2014 to 2015, so in 2014, Erika gave an interview to Arizona Foothills magazine. She described her ideal day, and the interview included this passage, quoting Erika, 5:30 p.m., happy hour with my favorite human and best friend, JT Massey. Also, conveniently enough, my incredible boyfriend. And then a few months later, in March 2015, professional couple photographs of Erika and Tyler Massey were published in Southern Scottsdale magazine. And it's unclear why these photos would have been published in an Arizona magazine during the time period in which Erika claims to have lived in New York City. But setting that aside, the nature of these photographs, and then combined with that statement she made about Massey, clearly established that she had a romantic relationship in that 2013-2018 period. And then lastly, we have a relationship she had with Cabot Phillips. And there are social media posts from 2017 that you can still access on the internet, showing her in a picture with Cabot Phillips, a conservative media figure. And there's a caption on one of the photographs that says, quote, "Yes, we're that couple who gets painting lessons together." And then interestingly, Cabot Phillips was a former senior editor at the Daily Wire, and he currently serves as a speaker for Turning Point USA. And it appears that Erika and Cabot have scrubbed their social media profiles of evidence documenting their relationship. But of course, it's not hard to find that kind of information, even if somebody scrubs their social media profile. So when I was preparing this segment and researching this, I like double and triple checked everything, because I just maybe Ness will say I'm naive. He probably will. But I was just kind of shocked. I was incredulous that somebody in her position would just get up and just in front of the whole world and just say things that are so obviously false and so easily shown to be false.
There is the rub, and that raises a couple of interesting questions. One interpretation of this is women lying about their past that they're ashamed of. More news at 6. That's about as standard fare as you can expect to get, especially in urban areas where the anonymity of social networks permits women to really indulge in the eat, pray, love, Sex in the City type of no consequences lifestyle. It's the same impulse, the same instinct that leads casual sex from the night before to be turned into some sort of unwanted advance or even rape the next day. And so in this telling, she was sowing her wild oats, and then she found Charlie Kirk and she had found her ticket to success and motherhood and never intended to be significantly in the spotlight, certainly not in a position where she was making executive decisions and guiding at least putatively guiding the direction of Turning Point USA. And so that is one interpretation here. It is reputation guarding, which women are quite proficient at doing. They, for pretty apparent evolutionary reasons, are able to self-delude themselves, not just delude other people, but engage in self-delusion where they effectively tell themselves a story of their past that doesn't accord with reality. But of course, the other story here that is the conspiratorial one that ropes in the fact that, as I talked about last week and Jeff reiterated this week with the Larry Ellison pro-Zionist mega media empire that he's cobbling together as one of the wealthiest people on the planet, that Erika Kirk is, and as was mentioned, one of the relationships that she had during that period of time was someone connected to the Daily Wire, and now the Daily Wire is effectively trying to commandeer Turning Point USA alongside Barry Weiss and Larry Ellison, trying to push Turning Point USA very much in a Zionist direction that it seemed like Charlie Kirk was trying to distance Turning Point USA from, but that now that it is in the hands of Erika Kirk, the ship is being righted and it's being sent in the correct direction again. And so that conspiratorial line can be extended back a decade in the past, where the thought would be that Erika Kirk was not someone who just spontaneously fell in love with Charlie Kirk, but was there as an agent, a treacherous agent, to eventually take Turning Point USA in the direction that it is now going, or somewhat less conspiratorial, but still quite conspiratorial, that the intention was that Erika Kirk would help solidify Charlie Kirk in his Zionist mega beliefs that he had at the time, and that as he started to drift away from those, Erika Kirk is a nice replacement for him who had not drifted in the same way that Charlie Kirk did.
There are photos you can find of Erika Kirk dressed extremely provocatively. I would say some of the more provocative images I've seen border on softcore pornography, where she's sort of playing to the lowest common denominator of right-wing incels who are lusting after somebody, and she's wearing an American flag bikini, holding a big firearm. And there are photos of her competing in beauty pageants, dressed in very scantily. And so the idea that these occurred during or very close to that 5-year period we were talking about. So the idea that she didn't drink and didn't date, and at the same time was doing provocative softcore pornography images and competing in beauty pageants, just leads me. And again, I did not come into this with any bias towards Erika Kirk. I was extremely sympathetic towards her after her husband was shot. But it's just hard to see things like this and not really question whether, at least it raises questions for me, that whether Erika's just a complete fraud, and that, 10, 15 years ago was beauty pageants. She was going to be a reality TV star. And then Charlie came along, and now she saw an opportunity to, hey, I can reinvent myself. And now I'm going to be a trad wife, conservative Christian. And that's what it appears like to me. Next Erika Kirk related story: at the America Fest 2025 event, which is Turning Point's flagship annual event, Nicki Minaj made a surprising appearance. And Nicki Minaj is a female black hip-hop artist. So on December 21st, she was brought on stage by Erika Kirk for a Q&A session before tens of thousands of conservative attendees. And during her appearance, she expressed, quote, the utmost respect and admiration, end quote, for President Trump, stating that, quote, he's given so many people hope that there's a chance to beat the bad guys and to win, and to do it with your head held high and your integrity intact.
Nicki Minaj loves Donald Trump and Jasmine Crockett hates Donald Trump. I think that should be the 2028 presidential campaign right there. I think that should be the race, the one that Dick Morris, the prognosticator par excellence from the early 2000s, who famously wrote a book entitled The Great Race between Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton in 2008. Both women would have to contend with the potential third-party spoiling candidate of aspiring President Camacho. But if democracy is about giving the people the representatives that they deserve, then I think nothing would be more fitting than that in 2028.
Also, when Nicki Minaj was on stage, she created a bit of a stir when she referred to Vice President J.D. Vance as, quote, the assassin. And apparently in hip-hop nomenclature, assassin is somebody who's really skilled and devastating on the mic and can deliver disses in a really effective manner. And there was gasp in the audience, and it was clear that Nicki Minaj had made a faux pas. And then Erika Kirk responded saying, trust me, there's nothing new under the sun that I haven't heard. So you're fine. I love you. You have to laugh about it truly. I have been called every single thing. And you know what? God is so good. You let it roll right off your back. And this is what's so beautiful about this moment. Because if the internet wants to clip it, who cares? I love this woman. She is an amazing woman. She has a soul and a heart for the Lord, a soul and a heart. And words are words, but I know she knows her heart, and it doesn't even matter. So Erika Kirk has these amazing, I guess she's just overcome by the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit just comes over her, and she's able to assess the heart of anyone. And despite Nicki Minaj releasing the most degenerate, vulgar, disgusting lyrics and music, she has a soul and a heart for the Lord because Erika Kirk says so. Charlie Kirk, at one of his many campus events, and sometime in 2024, he was asked about the topic of black culture and role models for black girls came up, and Charlie Kirk specifically singled out Nicki Minaj as being a bad influence on black girls. And then fast forward, and this clip was from, I believe, 2024, so a year or two later, after he is killed, his wife, who took over his organization, finds it fitting to give Nicki Minaj a key high-profile slot at Turning Point's annual event. I didn't even know what to make of that.
Well, to stick with the idea that this is a potential hostile takeover that's taking place, which is more or less what Candace Owens has been insinuating without directly making the assertions. This could certainly be read as a clear signal that a change in direction has been reached, a change in direction not just in terms of the big political questions of the day, but also the cultural ones, and all the way down to the future operational direction that Turning Point USA is going to take. And even though the content of Nicki Minaj's cultural output is not at all in line, not at all congruent with the conservative Christian traditional wife image that Erika Kirk references, even though the way that she expresses it is more adeptly described as a sort of mystical spiritual experience rather than one that is rigorously doctrinally Christian. But even as Turning Point USA moves back firmly in the pro-Israel mega camp and culturally becomes much more libertine than Charlie Kirk would have been comfortable with, it is simultaneously wrapping itself more ostensibly and ostentatiously in religious language. Turning Point USA, it's easy to forget, when Charlie Kirk got its start, really had very little at all to say about religion and was much more a sort of free market, prosperity, libertarian themed organization interested in getting the government off of people's backs. And over time, it has become more and more focused on the faith aspect of things, although, as Jeff alluded to, in a way that feels fraudulent even for someone who is not a believing Christian. Because to invoke God's hand in very picayune things, in one interpretation, could be viewed as God being intricately involved in everyone and caring about the hair on everyone's heads, but more often and more authentically, I think, comes off as just being cheap and showy and, dare I say, even sacrilegious. Because on this particular point, the person of Nicki Minaj, Charlie Kirk's argument that he was making in the clip that Jeff played is far more scripturally sound than what Erika Kirk is doing and saying that she loves everything about Minaj because she has a heart of gold or whatever the case is. In particular, Charlie Kirk talked about how Nicki Minaj was a bad role model for young women, for young black women. And that brings to mind Matthew 18:6, where Jesus says, quote, "If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea," unquote. And so the idea that you have this cultural influencer sending people in a terrible direction, which is the point that Charlie Kirk was making, which is why an organization like Turning Point USA should never reach out and endorse someone who lives a life like that, and why doing so is such an affront to his image.
There's no indication that Cardi B regrets in any way the content she has put out in the past, of an extremely vulgar, degenerate nature, nor and I assume, I don't follow her, but I assume she's still putting out content of a similar type. There's no indication that she's renounced that in any way.
Yeah, it would be one thing if maybe she had some sort of Saul to Paul Damascene conversion, and that she was looking back at what she had done in the past and trying to repent and make penance for it. But that is a conception of Christianity and religion in general that is more masculine than the Christianity and the religion in the Western world more manifest in the current year. Traditional Christianity is more masculine. There is a set of standards as a guiding principle to measure one's conduct against, and invariably people will come up short of that, but that is the aspiration, and upon falling short, repentance is required, taking full ownership for one's failings and trying to become better through that struggle is something that is very masculine in its orientation, whereas the more feminized version of Christianity is the idea of God as a friend, that God as a partner, God as someone who justifies, permits the justification of behaviors, not one who challenges someone's beliefs, but instead affirms one's preferences and predilections. It's an idea of God as something that is all about love and tolerance, and that I would argue bears almost no resemblance at all to the historical Christian conception of God. That Nicki Minaj, Erika Kirk version of God is in stark contrast to Psalm 139, verses 21 and 22. Quote, "Do I not hate those who hate you, Lord, and abhor those who are in rebellion against you? I have nothing but hatred for them. I count them as my enemies." Unquote. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.